Okay, good morning, everybody. What is up? So I'm back with Leprechaun 2, and this is part 2 of my Leprethon leading up to St. Paddy's Day next week. I'm going to be covering the entire Leprechaun franchise, start to finish, and who knows, depending on how long that takes me, I might even throw in a couple of those other cut-rate Leprechaun knockoffs that they have on Tubi. Those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, and if you don't, just look up Alex A. Gammer, and I will be there. I have added another stipulation to this little Leprechaun. I'm keeping a bottle of Jameson Irish whiskey at the ready, and as soon as this series makes me crack, I am cracking that bottle, and I will reveal the fateful film that drove me over the edge on St. Paddy's Day. Now, just to get it out of the way, this was not the one to do it. It certainly was not by any stretch. But I will be keeping the camera close by. I'm going to be filming myself every movie I watch, and I will be sure to capture the moment that the straw finally breaks this camel's back. But until such time, let's get down to the movie. And honestly, despite my worries after the first Leprechaun movie, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed Leprechaun 2. It was actually a really fun little B-movie romp. It was not like a masterpiece. It's not going to change anyone's life necessarily. But for a mid-90s straight-to-video horror film, it's totally serviceable if you just need to be entertained for 90 minutes. That is not to say the movie does not have its faults, but don't worry, we'll get there. Now, Rodman Flender takes over as the director on this one. He would, later on in the 90s, go on to make Idle Hands and a handful of other movies too. And his light touch, I think, is very well suited to this material. Although, to be perfectly fair, with that first Leprechaun movie, it's been documented that the movie was on a bit of a collision course as far as, first of all, trying to be serious, then having Warwick Davis come in and apply a more comedic tone to his performance, which obliged him to alter things, and then other people insisting that the movie had to be more R-rated, hard violent on top of it. It was just too much of a tossed sell. I don't think you can really blame the director on that one. In any case, I really noticed right away how much more sort of streamlined this movie feels. It feels like it has a very clear idea of the kind of movie it is. It's self-aware, it knows the tone it wants to affect, and it actually has a coherent story to tell. However threadbare that story may be, it's actually a real story, whereas the first one just felt like a bunch of scenes that were sort of cobbled together. And it is called Leprechaun 2, but it's not really a sequel by any working definition. It's an anthology sequel, I would say, because there is no mention in any form of the events in the previous film. Yeah, some of you were wondering what I was going to say about the continuity in this franchise. What continuity? But again, I feel like it's kind of a bad method to sort of weigh the continuity of a franchise against each individual film. And on its own terms, again, I think this is a very entertaining little horror comedy. As I just mentioned, the campiness is consistent all the way through in terms of the tone. And I also just feel like the movie has a little bit more confidence in the Leprechaun as a character. For one thing, they basically do away with the whole notion of him being sort of a little dwarf slasher and sort of focus and center more around his evil magical powers. First of all, that does clear out any cognitive cobwebs that you might have had watching the first movie. But more importantly, it translates into some very creative kills. The lawnmower kill is easily my favorite, even if it does suffer a little bit by comparison to Dead Alive, of course. I mean, nothing's ever going to top Dead Alive. But this was still a lot of fun. Even if it cuts away to an implication of violence before you actually get the money shot, the way that it's all set up is still done well enough that I enjoyed it. The one with the milk steamer and the espresso bar also gets some points too. And that barista, by the way, some of you may recognize as Michael McDonald, the comedian who most recently, I think, played Little John in Halloween Kills. Comparing him to how he looks in this and Halloween Kills so many years later, by the way, I have to ask, what is this guy's secret? He is one ageless bastard. Holy crap, I'm jealous. But that's another thing that I didn't expect with this movie, is the amount of familiar faces that popped up in nice little surprising bit parts in the cast. As I just mentioned, you have Michael McDonald. You also have Sandy Barron playing the character Morty in this one. He played Jack, Jerry's dad's nemesis in Seinfeld, for those of you who need a point of reference. But I was really stoked to see him in this. From the second that I saw him on screen, I just lit up. The guy was a treasure. May he rest in peace. You even get Tony Cox showing up in an early part for him. Granted, this being the mid-90s, he's subjected to some jokes about his height and his race that definitely do feel dated by today's standards, just to put it nicely. But I mean, that's sort of something that he's been unfortunately dealing with, I think, the majority of his career. I mean, holy crap, this guy must be a good sport if there ever was one. But just like Sandy Barron, he's one of those faces that can't help but make me just light up as soon as I see him. And his charisma and talent are still very evident even at this stage. Could really see that this guy had charisma and charm to spare. And who could forget about the always dependable and instantly recognizable Clint Howard? I mean, he was never necessarily destined to be Mr. GQ or anything like that, but Howard's always had a face and a presence that, again, it's the kind of thing that makes you fall in love with these supporting actors, and he's right up there in that category for me. I mean, even in this movie, where you can tell that they probably only had him for like a day or two of shooting, he brings his A game, man. And I know the definition of A game when you're doing something this campy is pretty broad, but nevertheless, my props. I definitely think it worked out for the best that everybody was in agreement and on the same page in terms of the kind of movie they were making here. Because again, where there was that sort of tonal clash in the first one, this one, everyone involved knows exactly what kind of movie they're in, and they are just playing it that way and having fun with it. Honestly, my only leak in the boat as far as the cast and really as far as the movie goes is with our two romantic leads. Played by Charlie Heath and Siobhan Durketh, I want to say. Again, having one of those moments, guys, I'm sorry, but I will put her name down in the comments here. I mean, for starters, the two of them barely have any chemistry. Like, they are acting like people who just got to set and read in the script that they were supposed to be in love or be a couple, but there's no spark here at all. And just to pick on Charlie Heath for a moment, sorry, I don't know where they found this guy, but he is gnashing the scenery like there is no tomorrow. He just showed up with a knife and fork and just cut out as much cardboard as he could and took a big bite. And throughout the course of the movie, he kind of chokes on it. And as a developing actor myself, I don't claim that these things are easy. It's not as easy as the good ones make it look. It's not even as easy as the bad ones make it look, to be perfectly frank. But he is just overplaying his emotions so hard that it honestly just comes off a lot of the time more like a really severe case of constipation than anger or sadness, rage, fear, confusion, whatever. Like, I mean, there are scenes like, I don't know, when the character Morty, played by Sandy Barron, dies. That was an interesting death, by the way, as well. But when that guy kicks the bucket, this kid's reaction is like literally, without like a bit of exaggeration, just, Marty, 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 Marty. Like, holy hell, dude. And then later on in the movie, after they've had that little run-in with the Leprechaun's go-card, and he stands up and declares that he's going to take his revenge on the Leprechaun, you've got the camera aimed up at him, and he's standing up there like this with his arms in the air and just going off about how I will kill that Leprechaun and hunt him down and fuck him up if it's the last thing I do. After a while, I was wondering, like, is somebody off camera sticking a cattle prod up his ass? Like, what is going on here? So for anyone else out there who might be an actor in training or development, let this be a lesson to you. Overacting is not a substitute for genuine energy under any circumstances. And then, of course, we have Siobhan playing the character Bridget. And look, you don't have to be a genius to see why she got cast. The movie makes it very clear on multiple occasions why she got this part. But that part of it didn't really bother me one way or the other. And honestly, like, the character is not badly written. Neither of these characters are badly written. It's the way that they're being played. But in the case of this character, Bridget, that's too bad because she's actually, for a horror movie, not really much of a bimbo. but the way that she is played, like, again, it doesn't really matter what situation you're in. Bridget just has this one face that she pulls throughout the movie. It's just sort of a, or, or something like, I don't know, just kind of a slack jawed thing that she does, you know? And like, for real, like when she's sad, she's like this. When she's happy, she's like this. When she's scared, she's like this. When she's angry, she's like this. It's, it's that Zoolander Blue Steel Ferrari La Tigra effect. Like, it's the same fucking face. Now, I don't know how much of that you can blame on her or the director, but something was missing there. I could be wrong, but I have this weird feeling that for Rodman Flender, as soon as this young lady took her shirt off, her performance was the last thing on his mind. In Flender's defense, he also makes the wise choice, and I've said this before about these kind of movies, to let the story really drive the movie rather than the performances. Once you just kind of accept that you're not going to get anything noteworthy out of these two young leads, they carry the movie well enough that it never really sunk it for me. Scene after scene did kind of impress me because throughout the movie, they did a good job of not just making this sort of like a physical fight, or people trying to sort of out magic or out voodoo each other in all sorts of indecipherable ways. There is actually a battle of wits going on here between the heroes and the Leprechaun. And more than once in the movie, the Leprechaun does get caught off guard. I mean, once or twice they get the drop on him and he's completely discombobulated for a few minutes. He can still hop around and teleport and do all sorts of weird little things, but this time around it never feels contrived or convenient. It always comes at a point where it enhances the story. And they get another thing right in this movie that I also always appreciated about the Child's Play series as an example, which is that here, while the villain does have powers, there are limits to what those powers can accomplish, and those powers don't stop him from, as a person, having flaws and making miscalculations and mistakes and misjudgments. He's not just some insurmountable force. I mean, this movie even has the balls to essentially end on an actual end note instead of sequel baiting. Obviously, that's not how it worked out. I think that even back then you had to have known that there would have been another one, but then again, there's no direct link between this movie and the first one anyway, so I don't know how mad I can get about that one way or the other. I mostly just appreciate that they actually tried to wrap the story up here. Despite some faults, I enjoyed this movie a whole lot more than I was anticipating. And while it's not necessarily a masterpiece or a must-watch, if you're a fan of some of those early 90s direct-to-video horror films and you like stuff like Full Moon or Trauma films, I think that you'll have a lot to latch onto here. Again, it's not like a home run in that department either, but it's at least par for the course. So if you haven't seen any of the Leprechaun movies and you're looking for one to start out with, I would honestly recommend that you just disregard that first one, unless you're a real completionist, but you don't have to see it to appreciate this one. Especially with this kind of an anthology format, the continuity, again, is obviously not going to suffer one damn bit. And I'm leaving this one more excited for the next one than I expected to be. We will have to see how that goes, because I have heard some people saying that Warwick Davis calls number 3 his favorite. But we're going to have to wait and see how that holds up. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. As ever, look for the next installment really soon, and have an awesome day. Take care.